Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So let's get started on how to audit SQL Server for free. I always say now as a caveat, it's for free because it's included with the Microsoft SQL Server licensing, right? But I mean, I'm saying you don't have to buy another tool, like a third-party tool, because well, of course, companies would love for you to buy their tools, but you can do it this way. So I'm Josephine Bush, and I have a lot of IT experience. I'm working as a DBA for a while now, a lot of different fields. And I wrote the book, Learn SQL Database Programming, and you can reach me on Twitter at Hello SQL Kitty. Also, actually, I just signed a contract last week, and I'm going to be writing a book on database auditing for SQL Server and Azure SQL, so I'm pretty excited about that. And some of this will be in there. Much more than just this will be in there, but I'm kind of excited. I can't believe I say that, but I'm very excited about database auditing, so that's pretty cool. So today I'm going to talk about why and how you can use auditing and how auditing can benefit you. And there's a lot of problems you can solve with it. It just make your life easier by knowing what's going on. You can centralize it, making your life even easier so you can report on it, query against it. And then I'll touch on cloud auditing a little bit because it is a little bit different. There's some different things depending on what cloud auditing or cloud options you use. So what is auditing? So here in America, I don't know in Canada if you have something like this. I don't know how you pay taxes, but we have to file taxes at the end of the year. Like in the next year, after the year is ended, we have to file like paperwork and give proof of all kinds of things. So they audit you, and because then I make sure that you file your taxes right. And people, when you get contacted, it's like, oh, that happened to me once even, and I thought, oh God. And they stopped me and they said, no, it's okay. We think we owe you money. It's like, okay, because you're worried about paying not only the back taxes, but penalties. Because if you underpaid, then you owe penalties. Of course, you also may be more likely, because you're in another country, you have internal or external auditors at your company in some fashion. And those can be kind of scary as well. So I think that's why auditing can have a bad reputation, but I think it's a good thing because you just see what's going on. You can, if you don't have procedures, you can create one. If you have one already, you know, oh, that's definitely not following the procedure. So anyway, maybe your company doesn't think it's important to audit, or maybe you're required to do it, but you're not sure how to set it up, or you can't really afford a third-party tool. But I think even if you're not required, it shouldn't stop you from auditing. I set it up because I got tired of people coming to me saying, oh, the database, it broke, something's broken in there. I swear everybody comes and says it's the database first, I think, or it seems that way to me anyway. But I would say to them, there's no perms or schema changes. Usually they just run off them because they think something changed, made it break. And I'm saying, no, there isn't. So I was really helpful. And then actually in the end, my company is acquired by a more heavily regulated company. So we needed weekly auditing reports that show especially what perms changed. So my boss was really, thrilled that it was already in place. And I had a new boss at this point anyway, but all my other bosses, they didn't think it was that important. So now they see the value of it. So, but like I said, you're basically in the dark without auditing. You see something change, that maybe that's what broke it. Maybe somebody's sharing around credentials. We caught a user sharing his domain credentials with other people when he's on vacation. We had an SA pass where this was handed out like crazy, and people were using it legitimately. That's how they were set up, but we had to get them off. The auditors were like, no. So they didn't even know the power they had. It wasn't like they were doing bad things or anything. They were just using SA to like write to a database table or something. So we audited them, work with them to get off of that. So the auditing made it easier because a lot of people, they don't even know. They're like, what? I'm using that? I don't even know. What is that? And where is it? So then at least with the auditing, you can say, okay, yeah, this is what you're doing exactly. It helps a lot. So really, auditing is a good thing. That's the upshot here. It helps even if nobody else cares. It's still for your own sanity, if anything else. If that's a benefit right there. So that's why I did originally. So auditing with SQL Server, you can do this different ways. This is one way you can do this, is SQL Server Audit. It's good at capturing anything that happens on the server, pretty much. It's very flexible too, so you can catch little bits and pieces. We'll see as we go here. And I use this primarily to see if there's any permissions or schema changes. And so you can access it in SSMS through the GUI, or you can use scripts to set it up and query it too. So it was first in 2008, only in enterprise. By 2012, it's all editions and the server audit, and then database audit was still only enterprise. By 2016, it's all editions. Now, the thing with the server audit's really nice, and we're going to see as we go through this, is you can actually audit all the database the same way with the server audit. So in 2012, when it was available in all editions for server audit, that was really nice because it gives you a lot more flexibility. So to make the SQL Server auditing work, you need two things, or three, depending on how you want to go about this. So one thing you need for sure is the audit specification, because that's going to determine where your audit data is going to live. And we're going to walk through that so you can see there's different options where to store it. Then if you actually want to collect audit data, you're going to need one of two things, either a server audit and or a database audit. So you can have one of each of these in each audit specification, and or just, you know, one of, it doesn't matter. We're going to walk through so you can see really quickly here. The server audit is good for auditing, imagine that, at the server level, right? So server level things like if you had a login, or if you, I don't know, you had a link server, something at the server level, right? And you can also audit all the databases the same way. So if you added a user to a database, or you added schema or something like that, then you could also do all the databases the same way with that. And then you have your database audit specification. Now that lives inside each database, and it's good for auditing just one database or a subset of activities. And we'll go through some examples of each of these in more detail. So you want to create an audit, you just right click in the GUI under security section, and it brings up a dialog box. You have to name it. You can name it whatever you want. You can create multiples of these. I'll show you soon how you can do that. Then basically, I just name it audit specification underscore server name usually, and that's, you can name it how you want. So then you have queue delay. That's the default 1,000 milliseconds. It's just a wait time before it audits. I never see any lag. You can set it to a 0, 1,000, or more than 1,000. I just leave it alone. So the next option's on audit log failure. So I choose continue because continue means if it can't audit, it's going to keep going. It's not going to stop this like fail operation. It will do that. It'll say, I couldn't capture this statement, so that statement fails. So if somebody was trying to query from something, nope, that doesn't happen. Or shut down servers, even worse. It says that I can't capture what that user is trying to do. Like if they're trying to select some data or something, I can't audit that action right now. So they just shut down the whole server. So I don't do that. I just do continue. If continue misses statements, well, honestly, I wouldn't know. I doubt that happens. It's pretty, pretty snappy, so it catches stuff. And then I only could see fail operation or shut down server if it's really critically important that they don't let somebody access the data or change the data in some way or change settings or whatever, because maybe it's a legal or financial server. If I chose those, somebody would be screaming at me, something's wrong with the server, which is exactly what I'm trying to avoid. So I don't want people coming screaming to me, there's something wrong with the database server. So for audit destination, you have a few options. You have file, which is like you literally put a file on a disk, or you have security log, an application log. And those are those Windows logs you can write into there. I personally use file because it's easy. I don't want to have to pick it out of the logs, the security or application log. We don't have a Splunk or something. I could see if you had something that will pull all your logs into central repository, that might make sense. For me, I just put in a file. It's easy. What I do though, when I put in a file, of course, my example has Linux path, but usually I do this on Windows. I was just tinkering with Linux for a while, and SQL Server was for fun. And so just make sure you don't put it on the C drive, and you don't want to put it on your data or log file drives, your system database drives. We're going to limit the files here. I'm going to show you this, but you just don't want to accidentally something happens to your settings. Not that it should, but I've done this. I've accidentally made changes or whatever settings I didn't mean, and then suddenly the files are going to fill up your drive. So you don't want that on C or your data or log drives, right? So I purposefully though set it to here. You don't do maximum rollover files and maximum unlimited type files and unlimited sizes and giant sizes. You could, but then you could never query them again. So it would be pretty fruitless, because maximum files, terabyte size files, I can tell you from experience, I let these files now only get up to 2 gigs in size, 4 of them at 50 megs. And even then, if you get a lot of stuff in there, it's not exactly snappy. It's just not so terrible that I can't live. It's pretty fast actually. But before, I would let them get up to like even 10 gigs a size. It's very difficult to query them when they get big. So you have reserved disk space checkbox there, but Yeah, I never check that because they're not very big. It's like 2 gigs of space, so I'm not worried. So when you create it, it's disabled by default. So you got to right click to enable it and make sure that you do that because no data collects when it's disabled. That kind of drove me crazy one time thinking, what's going on? Why isn't it? It's nothing collects because it's disabled to start. So once it's enabled, it puts a file on disk. And so it just collects. See, it's 0 kilobytes right now because it's ready. It's waiting. There's nothing here. There's nothing to collect. We haven't set up a server database audit, so nothing's going to happen. This file is going to sit here empty. It's going to go up to 50 megs. It's going to roll over up to 4 files because that's what I specified, right? And then it's going to drop files off the back. So once it gets up to 4 files of 50 megs and it needs more, it's going to drop one off the back. It's going to create another new one. So that's one thing you need to note. Is if you want to collect and centralize this stuff, which I recommend highly, then you need to know how fast your files are going to fill up based on how much you're collecting. So we have a few audit categories here. So we have server level, which is like permission changes if you're creating a database or a login or stuff. We're going to go through kind of what these are so you can see more detail. And then database level actions is like DML or DDL type stuff like schema, like you added schema, you added a table or dropped a table or stuff like that, or added a user, something like that. Then you have audit level actions. And this is like part of the auditing process. It's not really great because the audit's not really capable of auditing itself very well. We'll see when you go through the demo what it does, and it's not great, but it is there. You could always create another audit that audits your audit if you're really worried about people making changes on the fly. But I mean, invariably, they probably could change that audit on you too. So, that's kind of up to you how much you want to audit your own auditing. So I'm going to show you how these get set up in the next few slides out from here. But these are server level actions that I use to get perms and schema type changes, like somebody creates a database, somebody creates a login. These are the kind of things you can kind of break it down. I found that I need all of these to get what I need in my audits for perms and schema changes. There is a link on the resources slide. So I have this slide deck up in my GitHub too. My GitHub is SQL Kitty. So you can always go pick in the demos up there too. So you can get all that after this. And then database audit action groups. So this is in each database, but like I said, you can use these at the server level audit too. So these database actions are available at the server level or the database level. And this things like you added a user, you dropped a table or created a table, things like that. So those are database levels. There's some more database level, like there's a lot of them. There's actually even more than I have on these slides. So these are some more that, somebody creates or alters a schema or things like that. Again, these can be used at server and database level. Now these actions here, these database actions can only be used at the database level because they're actually capturing, they're not, well, that's a misnomer, capturing data changes. I meant to change that title on the slide. What they're really doing is capturing the statements that are running queries against objects like tables and views and sort procedures and such. So they capture that statement. And this is where the database audit, I think, really shines, is that you can get down to that level of what people are doing, like inserting to a table. So this here is the first of the 2 optional audits. I mentioned the server audit, right? You can right click under security to create a new one. It gives you a dialog box. The name is not going to be grayed out like in my screenshot here, I guess, because I managed to take a screenshot after I created it. But anyway, same thing applies here. You can name it whatever you want. I usually name it server audit specification _ server name. Like I said, you can have multiple of these. We'll go through some use cases on that, but you can name what you want. Then you got to associate to your audit. That specification we set up where your data is going to live, there's a drop down. So it's nice. You can just choose that and drop down. It won't create without that because that's where the data is going to live. Then we choose our actions. A lot of actions here. These basically, they get all the perms and schema changes at the server level and all databases the same way. That's what this is going to do here. Yeah, there's a lot of them. There's even more, like I said, I think there's even more stuff you can put. There's definitely more stuff you can put in here. But this gets it. If you put too many things in there, there's some other actions I think I have later in the deck that, if you do that, it's just going to overload you. So I don't think you have a lot of perms and schema changes. So this probably won't overload you. So it is also disabled by default. You right click it, right? No data is going to collect. So you got to make sure it's enabled. Then we have our database audit, right? The second of those two optional things. You have to go into each database in the security section and choose, right click and say new database audit specification. Brings up a dialog box like the server audit one. So you name it. In this case, I highly recommend you name it underscore database name, because if you want to use a system tables, which is in the extras of my slide deck, because I usually don't have time to go through all that, it will be impossible to figure out which audit goes with which database, because you would think it would link back to like sys databases table, but it does not. And so good luck figuring out which one goes with which if you want to go quickly check the sys tables for how you set these up, because yipes, it's a mess. Anyway, so then again, you have to specify the audit, right? The audit specification, and that's where the data is going to live. Now, these here will get perms and schema changes for this database only. But remember, you don't want to set this up in your auditing database if you already set up that server audit, because that server audit I just showed you is going to get auditing database on its own. I just wanted to show you how this works. So then what I mentioned about database audit, right, where it shines is the insert, update, execute, select, like that kind of stuff against tables and views and stored procedures. So you then have to fill out where I left those last columns. You see those objects columns after the action type are blank. Now you have to fill these in, because you're saying I'm going to get insert on an object, like the testing table. And public in this case means everybody. Doesn't mean somebody's login is public. It just means everybody. Anybody who inserts to the testing table, get that, audit that, and then in this case, we have update, execute, obviously that's a stored procedure. And then you can do that also on a schema and database. You see down the update and delete. And then if you want to specify one or more users, so in this case on the schema auditing, I'm sorry, on the schema DBO, I'm just getting the auditing user. Just as to show you an example of just doing one user. Thing is, if you want multiple, you just have to add another line. You got to duplicate that line, put the next principal. You can't do a comma or semicolon or anything like that. You got to do a separate line. So what I want to say in my bold red down there is, because it can get really cumbersome if you start auditing entire schemas or databases, or even really busy tables if you put selects or whatever people are doing on there. So just note that can kind of get big on you really fast. So again, it's disabled by default, right? It's not going to collect any data. And then let's say you're like, oh, well, I want to do perms and schema changes in this one audit, but I want to have a separate audit for something else. I just want to get different things with this other audit. Maybe you have some different criteria. So it's going to give you an error, which seems sort of cryptic. The thing is, you can only have that, like I said, one server audit, one database audit per audit specification, but you can have multiple audit specifications. So you could say, I want to audit schema perm changes, and then you have that first line there for you. You want to do, I want to audit everything SA does, like literally everything. So I want to put that in a separate one, because I don't want to see all that SA stuff mixed in with my perms and schema changes. And then I could say, I want to audit everything anyone does to change a table. So I could set up a different audit specification with a database audit for that. And then I don't know, maybe I wanted to do auditing schema perm changes at the server level, but not all the databases. And then I just want to get one database. You know, there's all these variations. You can do all kinds of stuff. I wouldn't necessarily put all of these on at the same time, but just this is what different things to give you an idea that you could do multiples of these. So this here just shows you kind of where they're in relation to each other, like how they're related but separate objects. And then in the GUI, you can just right click your audit specification. So that top level thing we create that stores all the data, then a dialog box pops up. You might see a ton of stuff because SQL Server is doing all kinds of things in the background that you didn't realize until you start auditing. So that may be the case depending on how you configure your audit. Maybe you see nothing because nothing happened. You probably would see the audit session started at the top, that top line there. And that's kind of the extent of the auditing on the audit session. It's not very descriptive, like I mentioned earlier. But you can filter, and we're going to go through that in a sec. But before we do that, we're going to go through the columns that are available to you in the audit. These are what I find to be the most useful. There are way more. You'll see in the demo, I'll do a select star from the function. You can see all of them. Like I said, this is what I find most useful. It was really helpful in 2017 when they added client IP and application name, and then 2019 has the host name as well. Thing is, before 2017, you're kind of in the dark where it's coming from. So you can see this actions, you can see the statements, but a lot of times people need more than that. So that's kind of a stumbling block with SQL Server Audit in the earlier versions, is you can't see the IP in the application, because sometimes you go to a user, they don't know. They're like, what? I'm doing that? I don't even know how that's happening. So that's kind of a stumbling block, and I'll tell you a little bit. Extended events can kind of fill that gap, is how I've filled that gap in the past. So to filter, you can right click on the audit specification you set up. Now you could do this when you set it up. I just didn't want to make it too busy at the front when we're setting it up to give you a filter also to deal with. So here you can filter on any column. Those columns I just mentioned, those are the columns you filter on, and you could filter out, say, your monitoring tools if you have those, or you see server name $. There's a lot of stuff in SQL Servers doing back there. You see some other things I put in there. This is basically like a where clause without the where keyword that's in this dialog box. So then let's say you want to delete your audit. It's kind of nice because in the GUI, because you can right click and then you check the box to say disable it, because you have to disable it before you delete it. You can't, it's not going to let it just run and change it. So you have to do that. There's a script, of course, then you need, if you scripted it, you'd have to disable it first. Of course, I have that on the next slide, so don't worry, that's there too. So the thing is, there's a couple things to note. So when you delete an audit, it leaves the files on disk. It thinks maybe you're going to come back later because you have some auditing needs, and I mean, that's not a bad idea. But I kind of thought I was going crazy because they were still there, but it's purposeful. And then also, the thing is, if you delete an audit specification, but its associated server or database audits are still there, even if you name the audit specification exactly the same, they're actually associated with a GUID in the background. So you just have to be careful if you start deleting things and re-adding them and making sure everything's reassociated, because that's another time I went crazy thinking it wasn't collecting, because I deleted some bits and parts and not all of it and put it back in place. So just something to note. So you, like I said, you can stop the audit. So you can do that also in the GUI by right clicking, or there's different flavors for different audits off to the side there with scripting. But this is another reason you don't want to audit too much, because it will be busy and it will say to you, like, I can't stop right now because I'm busy auditing. And I actually had I laughed, but it wasn't terribly funny at the time. I have a horror story because I actually crashed a production server, and it's not because the audit itself, the audit's very lightweight. So it's not a, you don't have to panic, you'll put it on there and it'll slow things down. What happens is, I had a very unique situation when I'm telling you don't audit select statements on a busy production server. I had to, because I worked for a credit card processing company. So we had to keep very careful track of who's selecting what and decrypting credit cards. So I had no choice. I had to do select. So I thought, I'm going to modify my audit. I got to stop it, right? Before I can modify it. Well, yeah, it was busy, and then it froze up, and then people's queries stopped working, and then I had to bounce the service. Thankfully, I just restarted the service and it didn't cause too long of an outage, but technically that should not happen. What you should get is just a lock request timeout period exceeded error. Because the audit's saying, I'm busy, go away. I couldn't get it to crash in 2019, but honestly, there's no way I could create the load I had. And really, it's not about long-running queries. Long-running queries aren't the issue with an audit, because the audit catches at the beginning. That query could run for a week straight. Audit doesn't care now because it said, I got that statement. The problem is if you have a lot of statements hitting, like one after the other, and the audit is trying busily to capture all these things. So like I said, I had select statements. I was on SQL Server 2014. Maybe this is the nature of the version. Maybe it's just, like I said, how busy it was and what I was trying to capture. But anyway, just note that for when you're trying to, if you think you're going to collect a lot of stuff, then, just be careful. So then you can change an audit, but again, you can't change it while it's enabled. So you have to disable it. That's my horror story, because I wanted to modify it. So, and the only thing to note is that you can't change the name of it. You can't modify that. You actually have to delete and recreate it. Hence when I ran into my problem of deleting and recreating something and then not reassociating. Anyway, my mess. That was my fault. So basically, you need those bits and pieces, right? I said the audit specification, where your data is going to live. And then you need something you need a server or database audit because nothing writes to the file or the log if you don't have those audits there. So let me stop for a sec and see if anybody has questions on the GUI bits of this SQL Server audit before I do the scripts.
Well, no one put any question, but anyone have any question, please feel free to ask. Oh, John, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. You export all those audits to a file, and that file is editable. What about if someone changed that files?
Well, I'm not sure that you could really change the file. I mean, that would be difficult because you have to have the function from SQL Server to change to query it. I'm not sure how you would edit. I'm sure you could edit if you wanted. But if you're really worried about somebody editing the files, if that's a concern, then I highly recommend putting your audits into security logs so that it's more difficult for people to tamper. And then I would say collect your logs, because I'm guessing you have more than one server, collect them into some log application like Splunk or something like that. So then people definitely can't tamper with that.
Okay. Are they binary files?
Yeah, I never opened. I mean, I opened them one time and it was just like garbly goop, like you can't read it. I mean, you could go and change something in the file that way, I suppose, but then everything would, I think then SQL Server would be like, well, I can't read this file, and then everybody would know that something weird happened.
Okay, what tool do I use to query or examine that file?
Oh yeah, we're gonna go through that because you can either do it in the GUI like I showed in the dialog box, which I hate that way, or you can use a script, a SQL script, and I'm going to show you that in the scripting section here coming up.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any more question, or probably you can go ahead, and then any more question, you can take that at the end of the session.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I have a couple places I stop anyway, so people can ask questions after scripts. There's a lot of information, so I make sure to stop at key points.
That's good.
So let's say you want to script all the boring stuff, because honestly, I like clicking and right-clicking and all this clicking drop downs, and I wind up, SQL Server will let you choose 2 of the same audit actions, and then you miss one, and when you save it, it saves only one of the audit actions from the drop, but it's a mess. I can't tell you the number of times I was tinkering and I messed something up in the drop down. So I think it's a lot easier to script it. Plus, if you want to put on multiple servers, who wants to sit around clicking and right-clicking everywhere? So you can, I mean, honestly, when I first started, I set it up in the GUI because I didn't know what I was doing. And then I scripted it out to see what the script looked like. Then I thought, yeah, I'm just going to script going forward because I want to put it on a bunch of servers with my registered server list, and it's good. So the script is really in line with the dialog box. So it's very easy though. So you can just create your server audit, set it to a file path. If you want to do application log or security log, of course, you can change that here. And there's a whole bunch of bits you can take out here, right? So then it's just, yeah, you put your path, you put your size, your files, everything's here. And then you can associate it to, I mean, sorry, you're not associating to anything. Excuse me, you're altering it and setting it on. You don't have to do that, but honestly, it's just easier because you can just set it on, you're ready to go. So you don't have to worry later. So then if you want to create your server audit specification with a script, again, very much in line with the dialog box, you create it, name it. For server audit, the audit specification, you're associating those to each other so that it can write data to that specification. And then these here are all the audit actions that are getting perms and schema changes at the server level, and all the databases the same way. And then I set it on at the bottom. So I don't have to worry with staying on. So I don't have to worry that it's disabled, it's not capturing it. So it's easy to take things out, add things in as you get comfortable with the scripting, especially instead of drop down and missing stuff and all that. So it's just very nice that way. I love it. So creating a database audit specification, very much also in line with the dialog box. You name it, you associate it, you've got your actions here. The only thing I'll note is that DBCC group, you can't do that server level, you can only do it at the database level. I just forego it. I just don't, use it because I'm not that worried about people calling DBCC things. I put it on some databases sometime, barely ever saw anything. One time, one developer called, I don't remember, something he was doing with DBCC, and I thought, huh, why is he doing that? But it's just, most people in prod don't have those kinds of perms to run those kinds of things anyway. So anyway, this database audit will get the perms and schema changes just in this one database. But like I said before, you don't want to do that if you've already done this server audit here. That's going to get all your databases already. So I wouldn't do this because I had already done the server audit. But if you had a one-off database, you weren't doing everything at the server level, you could use this. So here we have the objects, the things like insert, update, execute, things like that. I put those in a separate specification, so I show you that here, creating that separate audit specification, because I don't want this stuff. I centralize all my perms and schema stuff. I don't want this stuff going in there, messing up my auditor report, trying to pull this stuff out. So then I create a database audit. Usually the reason I do these kinds of things is with this kind of database audit is because a developer comes to me and says, I don't know, we're trying to figure out who's using this table, what's using it. So that's one reason I do this. Or I'm trying to figure out, because we're doing a lot of cloud migrations, and I'm trying to figure out, do we need to move all this stuff? I think this database isn't really in use, or maybe this schema isn't in use. And that's when I'll do whole large swaths of auditing on databases or schemas, is because I think it's not even in use. So maybe we can get rid of it. Because again, these can get big fast. Like my horror story of selects on all this, like it gets big and messy. So here is how you can filter with the script, right? Very much in line with the dialog box, except you use the where keyword here. So it is exactly like a where clause. So you can say, I don't want to see my monitoring account. I don't want to see some SQL Server service account. Or you could say, I just want to see SA. In my case, like I wanted to see only SA, of course, then that is the only thing you're going to get. So here is the query to query the file directly on disk. So you call a function, the fn get audit file, right? And you put the folder in there that you put, where you put your files. And so these are the columns. Like if I said select star, you can see all the columns that these are the ones, like I said, that they're the most useful to me. You'll notice I did some sys date time offset stuff here because this is in UTC time. At first I was going crazy. I'm like, what time is this in? So anyway, it is in UTC, by the way. So I set it because I want to see it in my own time zone. And these are the columns available in 2019. So like file name, application name, client IP, you're not going to get those. Host name, you don't get before 2019. Application name, client IP, you don't get those before 2017. You get those only in 2017 and on, so you don't get those in the older version. I'm really curious to see what they put in SQL Server 2022, although my company won't be doing that because we're going all to the cloud. We're going to move off-prem entirely by next year, apparently, so oh well. So then I interjoined the DM audit actions just because I want this action column here, audit action, because sometimes I was getting stuff in the audit and I thought, what is that doing in there? That's not something I audited. But that just helps you see the things that like view server state. The SQL Server is doing the background to support someone's query. So that just kind of helped me as a sanity check. So again, my disclaimer on auditing, right? Even if you don't overload your server, because that should not happen. That was I've never seen that happen again. And I have lots of audits on different production servers that are busy now, and I don't see that. But it's the nature of what you're auditing. So if you're going to audit a bunch of select statements on a big table that's really busy, well, yeah, that, you might want to rethink that, just because if you can avoid that, because your files get big, you get so much data, you can't pick through it. And so, less is more kind of thing. So then we have our script summary here, just everything you can do in the GUI, you can do with the scripts, right? So it's just so much easier to create on multiple servers, easier to filter, easier to centralize, because we're going to go through centralization in a little bit here. And so I'll pause for a second to see if there's questions about the scripts. I'm going to go through a demo too, so you can, I think that might help some with the scripts too, because I'll run through it all.
If anyone, okay. Yeah, John, you have a question. I also have one question. John, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wondering what kind of percentage overhead it may add if you do a full auditing. I know it probably depends on the nature of the transactions, but from your experience, what have you seen?
Well, I can honestly tell you that I did some pretty aggressive, sounds like a weird thing to say, aggressive auditing at my old job on a table that was giant. It was like over 2 billion rows, and it had encrypted credit card numbers, and there was no performance hit at all. Really? So seeing what everybody's selecting off of that table, which is a lot. So it's lightweight. I really wouldn't recommend auditing everything that's happening on a busy production server, because you'll just have so much data. It'll be really hard to pick through, is the one problem. That's my bigger problem with auditing a lot. Just you'll have like a fire hose that you won't be able to drink from it, and then you might as well just not audit. That's more my concern.
Okay.
Yeah, Anka got one question. Anka, you can go ahead.
Okay,
sure. Yeah, just a question regarding. So when you audit, right? Like I understand a lot of the audit needs are in production, but would you be turning audit on if for releases to production? For example, I'm working on a project where we're just starting to set up production and set up all the infrastructure, but I'm not sure auditing what makes sense because we're not giving a time-based access to release in production. We want to be able to audit when a change is made in production, so we can make sure that it's aligned with the release schedule.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what you do, or we have an example of what's the proper audit to go for at an early stage in a project where you're just setting up release to that environment and setting up all the database assets.
Yeah, I feel like to me, as auditing still one of the first things I put in place on a server, even if I'm early in the process. I mean, I'll set up, okay, let me say how I would do if I was, like in the case, we don't actually set up a lot of new SQL servers, but sometimes, like I said, we're going to the cloud. So I think what I would do in that case is, if I'm migrating, if I migrate a database to a new server, I don't put the auditing on until I'm like ready in place. I don't want to audit all the things I'm adding to make it look like the old server, for instance. I'm not going to do all that. I don't want to see all that. But once it's all like its old version, then I'm going to go ahead and put all the auditing in place, because I want to see all the changes that somebody makes. So I guess if you're ramping up a new server and nobody's doing, you're the one making the changes, and you're not really worried or concerned that somebody else even has access. But once other people have access in any fashion, I would say you want the auditing to be in place, regardless of anything else.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we're not in SQL Server, we're in Azure, in cloud, but I assume there's a lot of functions and services there to turn on the audit. But like, as you said, after you've established your environment and you kind of do a quick test to make sure everything is flowing, right? The data and all the pipelines, and and then you just want to audit the access, right? Who goes in, and what kind of activities they do in that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because they might do it outside of some release or deploy window or something, and then you catch people doing things that naughty shouldn't be doing, right? So, and most people don't. I haven't really caught a lot of that, but it's there for you in case, or somebody comes blaming you about the database, then you have it. So it's for your own sanity too. Yeah,
but it's also because the project is set up to work with a lot of vendors, right? So that there's a vendor that does DevOps releases for us. It's not so much internal in the company. So that's the challenge, right? Still building a process and making sure that they have a time-based, a 24-hour release window to go and release the code. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I got a question. It's related to you were talking about the cloud versus on-prem. I understand everything you are showing here is related to on-prem databases, but how it works in cloud. For example, we have Azure SQL database serverless. Will this syntax work there?
So not on Azure SQL Database, and I'm gonna go through the cloud stuff. And actually I highlight Azure SQL Database because it is different. So I have a cloud section after the demo that I'll go through and highlight those differences.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So before I do the demo, I just like to quickly say I mentioned extended events at one point, and the thing is they're also straightforward to configure. But the thing is, like I mentioned with SQL, like SQL Server Audit in the older versions, like before 2017, and you can't get the client IP or anything about where the query came from, you can use extended events. I actually have another presentation and demos related to that because that is actually what I did when I audited SA on that production server to see who was using it, because it was on SQL Server 2014 and I couldn't see where it's coming from and I desperately needed to know. So just know it's there. I'm not covering it today, but I do have scripts and slides in my GitHub as well for that. So that is just another option for you. It's different, let's put it that way. It has its own foibles, but it does definitely work for that. And so that was just another option for you. So I'm going to pop over to my demo here so you can see the scripts and GUI and things in action. So, yipe. Oh, that didn't go so well, did it now? There we go. Okay. Okay, so like I said, this script's up in my GitHub as SQL Kitty. And I just put this here, so just to make sure you run it against a test environment, just run this thing and hope for the best. And so this was for me to walk you through too. So then you can walk through on your own if you want. So what I'm going to do is first set it up in the GUI, which I hate doing, but this at least shows you how you can do it. Like if you want to tinker on your own, you're not comfortable with the scripts, you're going to feel for it, right? So we're going to go in here and we're going to create an audit specification. And I'm going to set the queue delay, leave it alone. I'm going to say continue, right? Because I just want it to keep going if it's not going to audit. I'm going to put in a file. So I'm going to put it on my E drive, which reminds me of something. Let me say, shall I do something that I forgot to clean up in my demo before we run into some problem? This is what I'm talking about. I deleted this stuff. Oh, there's my X. These are the SQL audit files that I deleted my demo stuff, but I forgot to do that. This is an extended event file, which I was just telling you about, is something else that you can audit with. And so it leaves these files behind, even though I don't have an audit in there. It's just left those files in case it's like, oh, you might want to use this later, right? So just so you know. So I'm going to put this into e-audits folder. I'm never going to use maximum files. Look at that, maximum files, like 2 billion files or something there. So good luck querying that if you want to. So this is why I try to keep them small, because even if you're going to query a lot, if you really need to query, audit a lot of what's going on, you want to keep your files small and then collect from them a lot. That's what I would recommend. So worst case scenario, you do need to get a lot of select statements or whatever. I mean, hopefully you don't, because it's a pain, but then you get the small files and then get them essentially, pull from your files regularly so you don't have to worry about them getting big and unruly. So here's how I set it up, just like on the slide. I just want to zoom in there for you a little bit. So I'm going to say okay, and then you see here this little red X. It's disabled, so nothing's going to happen. It doesn't matter what we do or don't do in SQL Server. Nothing's going to happen. So we're going to enable it. So now it's ready to go. So I'm going to set up one more with the GUI, and like here, like I said, I just name it you can name it whatever you want. Then drop down nicely, since if you have multiples of these, it's a little nicer to try to associate. So in this case, I got to see, this is every time, half the time I mess this up, because server object change group down here in your audit action types. So you're going to do server object. So it's half the time I pick schema. This is why I hate the drop down thing. So server object change, so server object change group, and I don't have to select any of this other stuff because it happens above that, right? So this is the setup now. Just one action for now. It's about all the actions I can take in the GUI setup. So it's also disabled. You see that little red X, so I'm going to enable it. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and create a database now. So we're going to say refresh. Okay. So there's my database, right? So I'm going to show you in the GUI to start here how you view the audit logs. Okay, so you're not going to see anything about that create database because that action doesn't capture that. So, but you do see this audit session change. That's just telling you, hey, something changed, right? We set up a server audit, we added something to, right? We started it. That's the extent of the audit you're going to get about the audit. Like I said, if you wanted to audit your audit, you could do that. If you're worried about somebody tampering with it, they could also tamper with the audit that's auditing your audit. So I'm not really sure if that would help you or not, but that's just another way for you at least to see what's happening on your audits a bit more. So I'm going to close that because I never want to use that again if I can avoid it. And then what I'm going to do is say, I'm going to alter my audit. I have to set it off, and then I'm going to add another action, the database change group, and I'm going to set it back on. So that's what that query is going to do. So I'm going to drop and recreate my database. And now what I'm going to do is show you all the columns here. So this here is all the columns that somehow got like smaller again. Anyway, oh, well, I guess I can make it bigger. Maybe you can make it bigger so you can see it. No, that doesn't work. That's the actual, I forgot, that's the script. Anyway, hopefully you can read these results. So this is all the columns, a lot of columns. I don't expect you to read that fast. I'm just saying these are all the options you have in the audit if you want to use some of these other columns for some reason. Like I said, the ones I found most useful, these are the ones here that then I do my sys daytime offset. I join it into my audit actions, so I get a feel more of what's going on, what I need to know. So we see we dropped it, we created it. So I'm gonna take this query though. I'm gonna put it in a new query window because I don't want to have to keep popping back up and down. Just so you know, that's just over there for us to pop back over. So you see it now. Let's say I want to create a login. Just so you see, it did really create. There it is, testing, right? So I'm going to go back to my query. I'm going to see, we don't see that in the audit because we need to add another action. So we're going to disable the server audit. We're going to add another action. We're going to drop, one of my attendees gave me this tip every time you drop. So if you do, okay, wait, so if you do this, it's going to error out. Wait for it, wait for it. Okay, so you have to put go between these statements. Anyway. Let's see. That's what they told me last time. So let's see. And it works. Okay. So then we go ahead and come over here. We see it now because we added that other action, right? So we see the drop and create because we added the server principal change group. So then I want to grant perms. I'm going to create a user. I'm going to grant a couple roles to it in the testing database, right? So then I come back over here. I'm not going to see it because I need to add some more actions. You see how these actions start piling on? That's why you need 22 or whatever of them at the server level if you want to get all your server and database changes, because they wind up working in concert with each other. Is also very powerful because then say you only want to see if somebody creates a login, well, you can do that too. And that's where SQL Server Audit really shines, because with extended events, that would be very difficult. It'd be very difficult to say, I just want to see somebody changes one table, or somebody just does a login, creates a log, or something like that. That's where SQL Server Audit really shines, is this very nuanced auditing. So I dropped a user, recreated them, added them to the roles. Now we see it because we added those two additional audit actions, right? So now I'm going to create a table. And then I'm going to go back over here, and we're not going to see that because I need to have the schema. There's that schema object change group. So I'm going to disable it, add it, re-enable it. I'm going to drop and recreate this table so we can see it in the audit. And then now we see it because we added that action. So you just this kind of keeps playing. I would never recommend altering on a table and granting to a specific user. Usually I use roles or something, so, but anyway, just so you can see this in action, I'm going to grant this alter, and you're not going to see that because I don't have schema object permission change group. So yet another action we can add. I'm going to alter that again, and then we're going to see it there. So now we see it. Oh, because I hit it twice. Oops. So yeah, because every time it runs, right, it's going to pick it up. Doesn't matter if it's already granted or not. I could run that 15 times and the audit be like, yep, that got picked up. So now I'm going to insert to a table, right? So I want to see if somebody inserts to this table. Well, I'm not going to see that here, because in fact we can't do that at the server audit level, right? We can't say audit inserts at the server level. So would set up, I personally would keep this separate from my perms and schema changes. So I would create, like I mentioned in the slides, I would create another audit specification. So it would live down here with my other audit, right? So now we have this testing DB1, and I would create a database audit, right? I'd say underscore testing tables, whatever, and it would go inside my testing database. So it is down here. And so now you see this here. So that is inside of testing. So then if I run this insert again, then you won't see it here because I actually put it into a subfolder, right? So you see that here is in the testing because I want to keep it totally separate. So you gotta put it in testing. Oops, invariably, typo. Okay, so testing. So now you can see this insert. So it is there for you. So you're auditing as that. I'm not going to log in as another user, but if you were to log in as that user, you would see it over here instead of like my server principal name, you would see testing there. Testing made that change, right? And here is filtering, right? So if we decide, since I was tinkering with Linux, that's what's still in there. But if it was on Windows, you know, you'd have domain name / server name $. So that would be in there. And then once I set it off, right, to modify it, add the filter, and then turn it back on. And then just so you can see that it actually puts that filter in here, even though we didn't set that up originally in the GUI. Now we just made that change with the script, right? So here you can see, these are the sys tables I mentioned. Or I could say, if exists, select this from the sys server file audits right where that name is that. So that's where it kind of comes in handy. And what I mentioned about naming your database audits specifically so that you know what they're related to. And I'm not going to go into great detail about this, but you can set all your audits, you can disable them all with these scripts, and then you can see now they are disabled. And then you can do the same thing with the dropping them. You see if they exist in the sys tables, and then you drop them. And then they are gone. I won't refresh all of it to bore you with watching me play in the GUI there, but so basically, this, you know, what I showed you earlier, though, about setting up an audit specification like that, you know, it's, you know, here's with your filter in it already when you set it up, and then you set it on. So you don't have to like right click and then enable it because I forget. Well, I'll forget it. Maybe you wouldn't, but I do. And then I just set up the server audit specification, right? These are all the actions that get perms and schema changes at server level and also at all the databases, same way. So I set that on at the end. And then here I have this commented out because you wouldn't want to use this database audit specification unless you wanted to get DBCC group or something like that, because you're already getting that stuff at the server level, so I wouldn't do that there. So, and then we went through this where if I only want to get a table, you know, you would do that. So at the end of the script, nicely, you can clean that up, which I always forget to do. But one day I will remember. I actually had an attendee say, "You should put it in a SQL Agent Job." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I should," and then I forgot. So does anybody have questions about the demo before I go to the centralizing part?
Don't see any question, but anyone, if you have any question, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Kang got a question. Kang, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah. So regarding to do this auditing, what kind of like permission for this one? So they need to have permission for the master database, right?
Yeah, I think you're pretty much, you have to have SA for this. Like you're gonna have to sysadmin rights to do this kind of auditing. I don't think you could get away with less.
Sysadmin, okay.
Yeah, I think so. I can double check. I have SA on everything, but I think you do have to have sysadmin rights. But I'll double check and I can send a message to the group later, but I'm pretty sure you can't get away with less.
And you know, Josephine, did you recommend like any kind of database, even small, medium, or bigger, should have the auditing?
I personally put the auditing on every production database. Yeah, doesn't matter how big or small. We don't have a lot of schema changes, but still, I always track that stuff. I just want to know anything anybody's changing, because anybody could come to me at a moment's notice and be like, oh, something's broken. So I just want to, yeah, any prod one. I don't do QA and dev. I thought about doing it because sometimes the developers come to me and say something is broken down there too, and they're DB owners down there, so they can do pretty much anything and then have me come fix their problems. But pretty much, yeah, everything in prod.
And you see like how the things is changing when the cloud came into the picture. For example, I was a database developer, BI engineer, or data warehouse developer, but earlier days, I never had to do maintain all sort of things. It's mostly like, DBA does, but think about nowadays, you as a data engineer, but still you need to do the things where earlier I would say DBA does, right? So that's the reason we also need to learn all those things and do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, where I work, we have dedicated DBA teams, so that's, but yeah, I can see like at different places you have multiple roles, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Hank, I got a question, I believe.
So I just want to add something else to the conversation about DBA roles in the cloud space. I just want to definitely when you're working with large clients, right, like large, let's say financial institutions or data processing, right, you do need that DBA. I just feel like giving the power and authority to data engineers to do their own DBA, you're going to end up with different versions, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
like, how is this set up in your world? Because I mean, you mentioned in one of example, you're working with 2 billion records and tables. So I assume there's a DBA that controls a lot of the processes.
Yeah. We have, well, there's what used to be a bigger team, but there's 2 of us left now that anyway, like every place I work, it's just always like you keep dropping off staff and not hiring replacements. But we have it controlled. So developers have access to dev. And then also because there was a manager that insisted they have access to QA, which I wasn't as comfortable about, but they have access to QA to deploy their own changes. But when it comes to prod, they don't have these kinds of firms. They have read, some might have read write, depending on if they're also like data stewards, like if they actually own the data itself. But yet no developers change anything in production at our company.
Yeah, and that's really how it is. I mean, that model should not change unless you're asking for chaos. But
yeah.
Okay, good point. So the reason why I'm asking is a lot of the firms that are starting in cloud, right? They don't have the idea, oh, we don't need a DBA because we're not in relational database anymore, because the cloud infrastructure takes care of the servers and everything else. It's all part of the logs, right? That comes with the package. But we need to also make sure that, I think part of establishing a new environment, you need to make sure you know what logs you turn on, what do you use for monitoring? Because if you have a support team, like a DevOps support, generally they have to check the logs before they do more investigation. And usually they do the deeper investigation in development or testing rather than production. But they want to observe the symptoms, right, first from production before they take that to to more investigation.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I cringe when companies say that. Yeah, well, they started doing that in my company too, where they said, oh, the software engineers are going to do their own database development. And I was like, well, it's squirming a little bit, because I mean, they're wonderful software developers. That's great, but they don't really know even indexing that well, or how to use indexes with their queries right. And so to me, even beyond that, like you're saying, when you're relying on them to do DBA tasks beyond it, yeah, in the cloud you can click some buttons and this is and that's, but there's still a lot of configuration and thought that needs to go into the cloud. Even if you can click buttons, you don't necessarily know which buttons to click. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you have a very good point. I mean, I've been in the industry for a long time, not necessarily deeper into any particular role, technical role, but I do understand why there's a need for those roles. So one thing they brought up, indexing, it's huge. If you really are a data engineer that's been doing this for a long time and working with large sets of data, you really need to know indexing, because that really impacts your performance, and cloud doesn't really take care of you. Indexing, and doesn't have this machine learning on top of itself to know how to optimize your code. So you're right, there's that specialty that will definitely be very important in large organizations. And I think the large organizations already know about it because they've had the structure of a DBA part of their core team. Is just, anyways, it's a long story, but
I know I'm totally
really,
with you.
Yeah, should really look at it.
I'm totally with you because, indexing, I had developers come to me and say, I'm going to put this table in prod. And I was like, wait, they're all varchar 255, or some of them were max. I'm like, how are you going to index that? It's just, they're like, no, I mean, some of them were dates. I was like, these are date fields. They're varchar 255. What? So yeah. And they're really good software engineers, but yeah, so yeah, I'm right with you. I'm alarmed by the cloud thing where suddenly everybody can just click things and do things, and yeah, it's terrifying. Yeah, but we'll go through the cloud auditing too here in a sec, because there is at least there's some things you can do as DBA in there. It's not completely blind in there, so you can audit in there too, at least.
Well, one thing to highlight, because I'm working with some amazing professionals. I'm lucky that I'm in a project that working with some Azure experts. But one thing with the cloud, because everyone else has been in the relational space before the cloud came into focus, is that for cloud, storage is really cheap, but compute is expensive. So this is where the cost of cloud will start going up when you're not indexing and you're making everything slow around you. So someone will have to come to the conclusion that this wasn't set up right? Very early if you have a large data set.
Yeah. Hopefully before you have a 20 billion row table that has no primary key on it and has a trigger that enforces uniqueness and then doesn't enforce uniqueness when it's in bulk inserts. So that's like a whole other story. But yes, a lot of executives are pushing on us saying you've got to move to the cloud. And then we get in the cloud in these workloads that didn't work on-prem, and they're very expensive. And they're like, what? This is more expensive than when we had our own data center. And we're like, yeah, because we tried to tell you that whatever. My magic wand is broken. That's what I like to tell my boss. And he has a good sense of humor, so it's okay. But it's like, yeah. Anyway.
It's a new package. It's a fresh new package, right? Everyone wants to be on.
Yeah, there's no easy fixes. That's the thing in life. That's everything in life, right? Any aspect of life. Just like putting your stuff in the cloud doesn't fix your problems. It just changes your problems. That's what I always say. But.
Definitely. We got one more question. I think, Kang, you got a question?
Yeah, I also try to set in the group of audit about store procedure. So I see there they just track the execution of the store procedure. How's about modify the store procedure? Is anything to capture that?
Yeah, the alters would get captured in the other actions. I should like at the server level audit, when I did all the databases, those alters and creates on stored procedures would get caught as part of the DDL. And then the DML stuff would be just when you execute stored procedures, right? So that it would get caught. It's just a different action. It wouldn't be the execute action. It would be create alter objects in the schema.
Oh, that's great to know. I thought it's only DDL they're going to capture, but it also capture DML for stored procedure.
Yeah, it depends on how you configure it. Yeah, but it can capture all different stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No more question. You can go ahead.
Okay, so now we'll centralize, right? Because generally speaking, I'm guessing you all have more than one production server. I think I have now. I had 100 SQL servers when I started, and I think there were like 40 in production. I think I got it down to like 22 now. So, but there are still 22 of them. So I want to have an easy way to query all the auditing data and generate a report. So I chose this way. There's other ways. I'm actually brainstorming, thinking this out. Other ways that might be better, but I chose linked servers. And so I put a linked server on each audited server. And then I have an agent job on each of those servers that sends it over to the central database. So I just picked a server that I linked to. It's not like a central management server, because that's like a thing in SQL Server that you can do, but it is just, I picked it as my central server, and I run it every, I think it's 4 hours. I said hourly on here, but it's an interval of your choosing, like what, depending on what you're auditing and how fast those files fill up, then that's how fast you want to collect that stuff and get it over to the central server. So once I have it on the central server, I have a job that sends a daily HTML email. Just I want to be on top of it. I don't want to wait a week till I send an email to the ticketing system, because I also do that for the auditors. We have a HTML file that we review weekly. So I want to catch stuff. I also only keep 30 days. That's entirely up to you. Again, I index all the scripts to set this up, centralizing the auditing database, the script, the indexes I use, and all that to support the queries I want to run and the cleanup I want to do. And then just note you need the database mail configured to send that email on your server, from your central server, right? So here is what the daily email looks like. It's just kind of a partial thing that I actually kind of made up all the stuff that's in here. It's not a real thing, but this is how it looks with like real data when things happen. So I only do a partial statement. You'll note here is I have the event time, the audit action, right? Because sometimes we're confused. My boss is like, what? Why did that come through? So I have the action that's associated with it. Partial statement, because it blows out the HTML when you put the whole statement, and the whole statement's in the database server, database schema, username. Successful, I used to think was like this amazing thing. I'm so excited, but I don't know, it's hit and miss. There's no way somebody could truncate the table like in this example, but yet, drop a database or something, and then sometimes it says successful, and it's weird. Anyway, but I left it in there. Usually it's right, sometimes it's wrong. I just want to warn you in case you see something that's like, well, that user doesn't have perms to do that. Anyway, so that's just a cross section. So that's what I get every day. And then, like I said, weekly a ticket goes, because the auditors need that. They require us to associate tickets, perms tickets, to the report when things change. So, you know, like I said, centralizing just makes your life easier. You know, picking through all different servers. Yeah, so that's just kind of how I do it. Agent jobs and link servers and stuff. So I only have the cloud stuff left, but if anybody has centralized questions, I can take those quickly now. I'm going to take the silence as no. So that's good. That's okay. That was a really high level centralizing. So like I said, my scripts are in the on GitHub too, the centralizing stuff. And setting up the auditing database and all that's in the my SQL Kitty up there. So you can go look at that stuff. You always feel free to hit me up, Twitter. I don't know. I have my email at the end too. You can feel free to email me. So here, cloud. So high level, right? If you set up a VM, you're getting exactly what you saw here because you got disks. I've set this up on VMs in the cloud. We have SQL Server on VMs in Azure. And same thing, because you got disks. So you just do SQL Server Audit, same thing. Then you have SQL Managed Instance, Azure SQL Managed Instance. You have Amazon RDS. So they also have SQL Server Audit, just like you saw here. But, right, you don't have access to the underlying disk. So you have to use cloud storage. So you got to set up a blob in Azure or S3 and Amazon. You got to set up a credential to access it and all that good stuff. So I'm not going to go over that here because SQL Server Audit works the same way. So then you have Google Cloud, which I haven't used, but I looked online and it looks like it has some cloud audit logs that look something like what Azure SQL is doing, because Azure SQL also does not have SQL Server Audit. But it does have server and database audits via the portal. So since a lot of people go there and it's different, like managed instance, you could get away with figuring out how to set up storage and write to it. So you know, so this is different. You have it built in the portal. It depends on your storage location, how much it's going to cost you. There is, or there was, last I checked, log analytics. You can store up to 500 megs a day for up to 7 days for free. Mind you, you cannot filter these audits, so it fills it up really fast. So that's just for testing purposes, because there's no option to say, I want to do only like the server level and not all the databases return at the server level. You can't just say, oh, I only really want to see some user, like not SA, because that's not in Azure SQL, but you know what I mean, like auditing user or something. There's no filtering on this stuff. So you just get everything. And so what's nicely is in all tiers. I even tried it in basic because I was kind of curious. So then here's high level, turn it on. Like I said, you know, you can click buttons. You may not know what you're doing, but you can click them. And so you say on and you get your 3 different choices. You have storage like a blob, and that'll put it'll put actually XEL files, which is extended event files. You have log analytics. That's that one. You get some free space. You can test it out. And then there's Event Hub, which I haven't used because it was more complicated than I needed. So anyway, you turn it on the server level. And then when you want to look at the data, so like for instance, log analytics, that's where I've been putting stuff. I put all of my databases in the same log analytics, so I can just go to one place and not have to go clicking all over different databases. And so you go in your database. If you want to get there, you can also navigate to log analytics without going to database. But you go to a database, you click view audit logs, you click log analytics, and then it brings up log analytics for you in this custo language, which is not super difficult to learn. It's sort of SQL-like. So, but the thing is, you turn it on the server level. You can just turn it on a database level if you just want to get one database, but then the same thing like with SQL Server Audit, you don't want to audit server level and then at the database, because then you're just going to get a bunch of stuff duplicated, and so that won't help you much. So, well, just a lot more data to pick through. So, like I said, they all have different things. So if you want to do like for like more, then you do a VM in the cloud, or you do managed instance, or RDS is pretty good. So they're very similar, but Azure SQL, a lot different. So it's just that the other thing you can do though in Azure SQL is you can do extended events. So I actually have a new presentation I'm going to be giving on the cloud to expand on cloud auditing, because I know that's like a big thing that people are going to want to do, and that will help you understand more like the extended events you can set up in there that you can actually then filter. You have to query the XCL files in storage, right? But still, I'm pretty excited about that actually. So does anybody have cloud auditing questions?
There is a question from Anka. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I do have. Obviously, it's a good time for me, this discussion, because we're just setting up a lot of infrastructure in Azure. But I do want to ask in terms of performance, right? Because that's very important since you're brand new, let's say launching an infrastructure and also a portal. Do you audit, or how do you monitor performance? Like, the SQL profiler kind of events running, because you may want to, like, you start seeing a lot of like volume increasing in activities on the portal, which is really the front end for a lot of, we're using Power BI, for example. So we want to know how is the performance, right, of the database, of the infrastructure, as more and more people like select the same data in the reports, let's say, or they're filtering, that kind of stuff. So.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, that's outside the auditing arena, but yeah, there's the insights on each database. You can go in and look in the portal. I don't know. I kind of always felt like it was like using the database tuning advisor. It's a little like, I'm a little skeptical that they know how to tune my queries very well, because I've seen the database tuning advisor in action, and I'm like, definitely never putting that on my server. But they kind of have that functionality in the portal, but I don't use it a lot. I have to admit that, I don't have a lot of time to performance tune our databases, and a lot of times things are forced to go into prod the way they are, and it's like, well, that's not going to work. And then nobody wants to change it later, so unfortunately you're kind of just like stuck with it. You're like scratching your head, literally. So.
Well, one thing you mentioned is that you do a lot of audit to know what's being used in the database. So this kind of falls in the same area of like what tables are read every day, even if it's through a report, right? That gives you an idea of like what portion of the database is really sort of accessed from a select standpoint, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, auditing wise. In terms of like, if you want a performance tune at that point, then you're stuck with either what Azure gives you in the portal. But actually, I was just thinking today I'm going to put some of the Ozar SP Blitz stuff on one of my production servers, because the CPU is overloaded again today. But I think you can actually use that stuff in Azure too. So you can use, I think you can use SP Blitz up there to help you, like if you're worried about like the performance of your table, like the queries and indexes. His stuff's really good with that. I like that stuff a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, because it's also like we have obviously a data model like a OLAP, but that's for us, it's very interesting because it's not built in the, analysis services type of infrastructure. It's built inside a Power BI. So we want to, that will be where most of the heavy processing will go, is in running the cube.
Okay, interesting.
I feel like that would be, I don't know, probably in the Power BI, there's some metrics like performance, or it could be
there could
the fact table and the dimension table level.
Yeah, I don't know. Power BI is like this nebulous beast to me that I occasionally have to touch because I have to add a gateway to a database server or something for somebody, and I'm like, oh my gosh, let me get out of this as quickly as possible because I don't want to be in there. But that's just me. I know Power BI is wonderful, but I just don't use it enough that I feel sort of terrified by it. But yeah.
I guess you're not working with analysis services, right?
We have some analysis. We have SSAS on a couple servers, but yeah, I try to avoid those. So yeah, you might know if you get lumped into DBA SQL Server that people think SSRS, SSIS, SSAS is like you're an expert at all of them, and you're like, well, no, I'm not. So I try to avoid doing much with those, except if I have to patch the server or some other stuff like that,
Yeah, that's fine. They're really specialties, and they come with their own certification from Microsoft, because you can get really deep in learning because they're really complex. Exactly. Some of them, yeah.
Right, exactly. But they put the SQL Server name on it, so then you're like, oh, yeah. Everybody's like, oh, that's like when my Postgres DBA coworker left, and they're like, you can just take over Postgres now. And I was like, huh. It's not like SQL language. There's like a whole like engine down there that's totally different than SQL Server. They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. Anyway, yeah. I know how that goes.
Yeah, we don't have much time. We got one more question. I think Ken, you may have a question. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, so regarding the cloud auditing, so I want to play a bit with the log analytics, but just not for the server. But the point is, we usually have different resource group, and we have one log analytics for each resource group. How can you do the centralized for those log analytics?
Well, that's a good question, because I haven't gotten that far, because we also have the same problem where I was lumping them together, but not always able to because of different like regions we're in even. I'll have to get back to you on that, because that's coming next year with my bigger cloud presentation. So unfortunately, I don't have the answer for you right now, but I will next year. Sorry, next year's not that far away either. Jeez. It's like coming up on us.
Yeah. If no more question there. Yeah. Sorry.
No,
I had to take my son with me because the other one, little one, is sleeping. So
no, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, you're totally fine. I'm pretty much done here. I just had this quick review for you to see, like, remember, you're not auditing a lot. You have those bits that you need to set up, like your audit specification. Then you need your database or server audit, because you're going to actually collect something, right? So here's the resources slide I mentioned. Like I said, this slide deck is up in GitHub already. And then that's it. So there's extras in here too, I mentioned. So like if you want to audit jobs, like people change jobs, I'm going to tell you, like agent jobs, right? It's a little bit less than perfect, but at least I know. Or SSIS, somebody changes a package, as we have developers that have SA to prod servers because we have SSIS. Or if you want to audit a specific user, those are in the extras. So because I don't have enough time to say all that unless I talk 3 times faster than I do, which you wouldn't be able to understand. So anyway, please contact me. I'm happy to continue the dialogue. I know we have to end our, oh, wow, I have like old notes in there. We have to end our presentation now, but I'm happy to take questions anybody has, or if people have to cut out. But I have to say, I love auditing. I mean, I never thought I'd say those words in like sentence together. So I'm always happy to talk about this stuff with people.
Definitely. For example, the one I was talking about, I know when there's a big organization, then there is a, DBA dedicated team. Even I work where like it's 10 DBAs was there, and never touch any database, especially just the development, then pass to them. And now, like when even the big organization, then there is a small team working only in data warehouse project. Then you have to do some of the stuff. I think these things, what I learned, I would like to implement that. We don't have yet, so this
Yeah.
is a great learning, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
Anyone
course.
have any question? Anything more? Any more questions or anything?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It's nice to talk to the group. So yeah, definitely contact me if you have any questions. Want to talk about anything, I'm happy to.
Are you gonna flip over those PPT or everything, or I should go to just to GitHub and share that link with the audience?
Oh, yeah, actually, I could do that really quickly here if you want me to, like, just drop a link in there, because then you guys can get to my GitHub. Let me just, I can put in the chat really. Oh, I can't chat, actually. I don't have the capability to chat.
That's fine. It's completely fine. I'll get it. I'm gonna send you an email anyway. So then I'll share, this link or the materials.
Okay, yeah. I can email it to you, and then you can send it to the group if you want, because that might be easier. So you know which one. This is the slide deck that in question. So I can do that.
And that I'm gonna do anyway. So
Okay.
after the recording, I'll share with all of you.
Okay.
Yeah. If no question, then thank you very much, Josephine. It was great learning, really good conversation. Everyone, thank you so much for your engagement. And yeah, hope to catch sometime.
Yeah, I'll come back. I'll come back when I got my cloud stuff sorted out next year. If you guys have time for me, I'll come back and give you my clouds auditing presentation for sure. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Yeah. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.